I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On tonight's episode, we'll have a quick update on the magazine. The Gators suffer a key injury up front. Corey Raymond continues to do Corey Raymond things on the recruiting trail, and we'll wrap up with will NIL spread the love among the top tier of college football recruits. We'll discuss a recent prediction from Shannon Terry of On3 on X, Will, not Twitter, X. Still getting used to that, man.
Yeah, that one's a little bit weird, but all I know is I appreciate that the day after they named it X, they had a big flashing sign in the middle of San Francisco, and then the city commission made them take it down, and that just amused me for whatever reason. I don't know why. That one really stuck with me. So, the city of San Francisco versus Elon Musk is going to be a fun. It's going to be a fun sideshow for all the stuff that goes on with Twitter and X and whatever it is, and hey, it's still a way to get our stuff out there, so we're going to keep using it.
Well, let's start off the episode here, Will, talking about the magazine. We do have some additions to the magazine. We have a few more pages that we want to include some new content to add. And if you purchase the magazine, you will be included in that content. We will send that out to you. But Will, we're only about 2 weeks away from the season here. And really, this is the last chance. We still got the digital copy out there. If anyone wants to buy it, this is really your last chance to get that preseason magazine in before kickoff on August 31st against the Utah Utes.
Yeah, so you can go to readandreaction.com/mag. That's readandreaction.com/MAG. Hard copies sold out completely, so thank you everybody for doing that. We've sold quite a few digital copies over the last month or so since the hard copies sold out. Those are still available over there on the site if you buy that, or if you bought, like you mentioned, if you already bought a hard copy this Friday, so the 18th, we're going to be sending everybody a link who already purchased it to where they can get the extra content. If you buy it after the 18th, then you'll get both links when you purchase the new when you purchase the magazine fresh. But yeah, I mean, look, I think Austin Armstrong certainly was a place where I wanted to spend some time, so I spent some time. Anybody who got the magazine originally saw film breakdowns where we had the play, we had QR codes to the play and descriptions of what was, so that you could see it on YouTube and descriptions of what was going on. I think I got a pretty cool breakdown in there of Armstrong, his aggression, some of the things that he does on third down, some of the things I think Gator fans are going to like, some of the things I think Gator fans are not going to like, depending upon what the result of the play is. And then the other thing was just looking at the wide receivers, right? One of the big things we've talked about all offseason is the three wide receivers, and with Mizell and Wilson and Gene, and hey, are they all going to become stars? Well, I went back and looked over the last 4 or 5 years at the 24/7 rankings and how often those guys became stars, what you could sort of expect as a top tier, even if those guys turn out to be really, really effective true freshmen, that sort of stuff. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then obviously you got a few things coming up in there as well. Some of the perspectives and certainly the naming of Mertz as the starting quarterback colors things a little bit differently when we were still sort of thinking maybe there'd be a guy coming through the transfer portal as we were drafting the magazine.
Thinking
That
or
certainly
hoping?
has
Thinking
a
or hoping?
little bit of both,
Yeah.
depending upon your view. But I mean, none of us were sure that Mertz was going to be the starter. There was always the possibility that something else was going to pop up. I mean, obviously there was Austin Simmons reclassifying over the summer that sort of threw things for a loop, and we were sitting there going, is he going to reclassify for Florida in 2023 and then be competing for the starting job? And obviously that didn't work out. So hey, it is what it is. There's a lot of things that are different than when the magazine was drafted, but certainly I think a lot of the stuff in there is really relevant. When you look at just the roster, who's out there, who we sort of expect to be the all SEC players, freshman all SEC players, looking at how the SEC was won last year, given some of the quarterback play in the conference. And then, why did Florida struggle there? You wrote a really great section in there about that. A lot of stuff about recruiting with recruiting maps that show sort of where the players are coming from and why Georgia's dominating the way they are right now on the recruiting trail. So just some really cool stuff in there. I think people will enjoy. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, 70 pages of Florida Gator football only. Get you ready for the season. And hey, if you're at the beach this week, like I'm going to be, you can pull out your iPad and take a look there. Just view it as a PDF and let us know what you think.
Well, keep an eye out for that through the email list, and Will has everybody's emails who bought the magazine as well, so he'll get you through a copy through there. Will, when can they expect it though?
Yeah, so it's going to be coming out on Friday. So Friday the 18th is the target date for that. For anyone who already bought it, again, you'll get a link just because you already bought it. We'll send that to you via email. You can download the new file. Anybody who buys it after the 18th will get both files when they make the purchase, so you'll have them right away. But that's when you should expect it, is the 18th.
Well, like we've said a bunch of times on this show, we appreciate everybody's support for the magazine. It's been a blast to write, and we do it. We love writing it. We're writing it in the spring, right? But we write it as a way to build up toward the season, and there's a lot of action between the spring and the season, which is a lot of fun over the summer. But the season's finally here. Unfortunately, we got some bad news to kick off camp here. Justice Boone, the redshirt sophomore defensive end out of Sumter, South Carolina, suffered a torn ACL injury. According to FloridaGators.com last season, Boone appeared in all 13 games, starting twice. He finished the season with 24 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 1 sack, and a quarterback hurry. This puts a lot of pressure on a young core. All right, they get a chance to step up though. Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy, Jack Pyburn, Cameron James, but Tyreek Sapp has also been moved from the inside back out to the edge. So a little extra support there on the veteran presence in that area. Will Boone was a guy I was very excited to see his development this year. We did see some good things out of him on the field in the last year here, and I was really looking forward. He was definitely one of those guys I was looking forward to see what his progress was heading into that really second solid season on the field for the Gators.
Yeah, this is a big loss. I mean, this is one of those guys who, across from Human Mealan, once Cox was dismissed from the team last year, really did start to be a bright spot there on the defense. I think we all expect Human Mealan to maybe be the guy who shines, but just setting the edge, making sure the running game doesn't get out of control, is a huge portion of what Justice Boone was going to be doing. And obviously, he won't be doing that now. So, yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, they've already moved Tyreek Sapp over to that position, so he's going to be filling in. Probably fits Sapp a little bit better than being on the inside anyway, but that does speak to what they think about the guys like Jack Pyburn and Quincy Ivory and TJ Searcy and those guys. It's just that it's going to take some time, right? That they felt like they needed numbers. Now, it also may suggest about what they feel in terms of Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, and Chris McClellan there on the inside, along with Desmond Watson and maybe guys like Will Norman, where those guys on the inside, if they're really showing out on the defensive line inside, they go, well, hey, moving Sapp to the outside is a way to get a more gifted player in. With Boone in the fold, he wasn't going to get in on the outside, but now with Boone out, he will get more snaps that way. So, look, I think Florida is always going to try to get the guys, especially with this team. They're going to have to get every edge they can. With the talent that they have on the team. I mean, it's a reasonably talented team, but it's not the most talented Florida team we've ever seen. And so, one of the things you got to do is make sure you've got your most talented 11 out there at all times. So with Boone going down, Sapp now moves into that role. I think that does further the goal of having your most talented guys out there. But again, it's a question of a guy who was training on the inside all through spring and for some of fall, and now he's sort of having to learn a different position on the fly, getting ready for the season. Whether he's more physically gifted or not is kind of, it's relevant, but it's not the most relevant thing. The question is going to be, is the technique, is the tackling, is setting the edge, all the different things you ask these guys to do, as opposed to just rushing the passer. Is he going to be able to do all that? Because, again, I think there were some really bright spots for Boone in a couple of the different games last year where you looked at it and said he did his job on that play. I'm not sure he physically dominated somebody, but he was doing his job more consistently than some of the other guys who were out there. And yeah, it's a bummer for him too. I mean, there was obviously sort of there's the interview going around on Twitter a couple of weeks ago where people were where he was talking about sort of his upbringing and what brought him to Florida and those sorts of things. And that was one of those things where you looked at and go, it seems like a really good guy. So to have it happen to him, to have it be a non-contact thing, apparently while he was celebrating a sack during practice, it just stinks. You expect to get injured when you're in a game, somebody rolls up on your ankle, something like that. But to have a non-contact injury during practice right before the season, I mean, these guys put in so much work during the off season to get ready. And this is right when it's about to get fun. And instead, he goes right back to having to put in the same amount of work again, if not more, to rehab the thing, get all the way through this season, get ready for next season. So, we wish him well. Hopefully he's back next year, stronger than ever. And, certainly Florida's going to have some guys step up.
Yeah, those injuries, like these types of injuries, it always sucks, right? You never want to see any of these injuries at any point during the season, but you especially feel for the guys that work all off season and you're so close to getting to finally step on the field and this happens. It's every year. You see it in the NFL, you see it in college football. It happens all over the game, which is one of the reasons why when you talk about recruiting, we talk about recruiting a lot on this show, but specifically, you wrote an article this past week, your toss-up series about the Tennessee Volunteers. One of the things we were talking about on the side is I know you've brought up many times on this show about the 2020 recruiting class at Florida and basically the bare bones that are left of that class. You saw a similar effect with the Tennessee Volunteers with that 21 class, and that's why when you look at situations like that, and Florida's still reeling from a couple of weak classes, and it's really hurting the upper class on this team, which is one of the reasons why there's a lot of skepticism about the 2023 Gators coming into the season here. But an injury like this, it really magnifies the importance of that depth early on. And right now, luckily for Billy Napier and the Gators, they do have some young guys that are going to be exciting to watch that are probably going to get some extra playing time as a result of this. However, when you talk about building for the future and really getting back into championship shape, missing out on that type of depth, that is tough early on, Will.
I mean, look, Boone's injury is going to hurt, right? I don't think there's any doubt. It hurts the depth, it hurts the skill, it hurts the ability, and it hurts it from an experience perspective. This guy has a lot of experience on the field. Whether or not he was a superstar is kind of irrelevant. It's a guy who's played real SEC snaps, knows what the speed's going to be like,
right,
knows exactly what he's getting into, and is going to be able to make big plays during the season just because he's got that experience factor. It's interesting. There was some stuff going back and forth on Twitter. I think it was an FSU fan who was tweeting about Florida having 4 guys at the linebacker position in this 2024 class. They've got Jamonte Waller, Miles Graham, Adarius Hayes, and Aaron Childs there at linebacker, and those are 4 guys in the top 100, and a bunch of guys who really are going to be classified. Maybe Waller might even be classified as a composite 5-star by the time everything's over. And you start looking at where those guys sit, and you go, well, that's a lot of resources being spent on the linebacker position. But then you look at it, you go, all right, well, you need 3 of them at any given time, right? Certainly you have things like this where guys get injured. And so stacking that talent, stacking those guys becomes really important. Now, you obviously need guys at other positions as well. But, I think one of the good things, one of the silver linings maybe in all of this for Napier, and look, I mean, no injury is a silver lining, or no injury is good. And I don't think that any of us wanted to see Boone get injured, but one of the silver linings is they have hit the defensive line really heavy in recruiting both last year and this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got a lot of guys coming in who by the end of the year, I think will be happy with the performance and with the snaps that those guys are getting. And Boone's injury, though unfortunate, does open up some of those snaps to those guys. And so you're going to get some guys who maybe might have redshirted who are going to play a little bit. You'll get guys who maybe would have only played, sparingly in a few of these games to give guys a blow, who all of a sudden are getting 15, 20 snaps. And that will build over time. And look, you have to build attrition into your plan. You never know who it's going to be, but someone is going to get injured over the course of the year. And it's unfortunate that it happens to Boone before the season even starts, but this is what football is, right? Football is, especially college football, you stack up as many players as you can over and over and over again at each of these positions because it's next man up. You never know when someone's going down. And look, I mean, in 2019, Felipe Franks went down in that Kentucky game. Florida was down 3 touchdowns or 16 or 17 points when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden Kyle Trask is in there and the dynamics of the team completely change. And whoever comes in for Justice Boone is going to change the dynamics, but that opportunity now exists for a player who's going to come in, and it's time for one of those young guys to prove it.
Well, one area where the Gators will not be hurting in the next few years in terms of depth, the defensive backfield. Corey Raymond is putting together quite a class. We saw a couple solid additions in this past cycle, the 2024 cycle. It's come together well. Corey Raymond and the staff, they use those Louisiana ties they've built up over a few decades here. They pull Wardell Mack out of a New Orleans suburb, Marrero, Louisiana. He's listed as a safety on 24/7, 5'11", 170, but he plays inside and outside on the defense. I want to really illustrate how impressive of a get this was on the trail, though, by the Florida staff. 8 of the 24/7 top 10 ranked players in the state of Louisiana. So the 24/7 board has the top 10 ranked players in Louisiana. 8 of them are committed to LSU. Mack is the first one that is officially committed to an out-of-state school. There's one other player, the top player, he's looking at Texas right now. He's got a crystal ball to Texas, but other than that, all LSU across the board. So LSU, one of those schools that is notorious for just keeping those guys in state. It's really tough to go in there and get a top player out of the death grips of LSU, but Raymond and the staff, they did it, and really, really good get here with Wardell Mack. I'll let you talk about where he's ranked, Will, because he's a little bit all over the board. You had a great tweet about that this week, or a great X, whatever post. What are we calling it, post now? But what I liked about him is that he really showed the ability to play inside and outside on that defense, play it well. He can press, he can play off the ball, and just he knows how to make a play on the ball. He's very aggressive toward the ball. Offensively, he also is a explosive wide receiver. Just clip after clip of him taking it to the house, either beating someone deep or taking a screenplay and making it happen. So bringing a ton of athleticism over with him to Gainesville in the class of 2024. Wardell Mack, the latest commit for Billy Napier and company.
Well, so there's a couple things there. One is that explosion on offense doesn't go away when you start catching punts.
Mm-hmm.
And Ricky Pearsall, it looks like, is going to be the punt returner this year. I know they're trying a bunch of different guys, but Pearsall's probably going to be the guy. And you don't really want to expose your best wide receiver returning punts if you don't have to. So Mack will have an opportunity to make an impact early on special teams, even if he's not a starter right away, because of what you're talking about, his ability to make people miss, his ability to catch the ball, his ability to take the ball to the house. He'll get an opportunity there. And same thing, Trevor Etienne is going to be returning kicks, it looks like, this year. You're going to want to start to protect those guys as they get a little bit older, get close to the NFL, those sorts of things. So a guy like Mack can contribute right away, right there, which is an important part of bringing in any sort of athlete. You mentioned the tweet I put out, or the X I put out. He's a 4-star, 115th ranked player overall in the 24/7 composite, but it's really interesting when you look at the 4 services that make up that ranking. On3 has him as 19th. Right. So they've got him as the 19th best player in the country. 24/7 has him ranked 231. ESPN has him 262. And then Rivals has him 74. So there's a big variation in terms of what these guys think about him. But I think what that suggests is that there are some people who see quite a bit of upside, and people who also see a guy who's relatively green when it comes to some of the technique, when it comes to some of the things that you need to do, the finer points to be a cornerback. But when you think about who's going to be coaching him, you start to become a little bit more sanguine about that sort of thing, right? Because, hey, it's a raw prospect, but the raw prospect is coming in with Corey Raymond coaching him. And I think the other thing that we need to take into account is you've got Jakeem Jackson, you've got Dijon Johnson, and you've got Sharif Denson, all top 300 guys at the cornerback position. Jackson's a top 50 guy at the cornerback position from last year's class. And then you look at this year and you got Xavier Filsaime, who's also a defensive back coming in, a 5-star prospect out of McKinney, Texas, coming into that defensive backfield. So there's going to be opportunity. In fact, there's going to be a lot of competition, and there's going to be opportunities for Mack to play if he can seize it, because you've got guys like Jason Marshall and Devin Moore that you expect over the next couple of years to be out of here. At the same time, they're loading up at that position, and given the fact that we haven't been able to cover anybody for like 3, 4, 5 years, just having that level of competition there at the cornerback position and the safety position, defensive backs in general, is an important thing for Florida to be building into. And even when you go back 2 years ago, where you got Kamari Wilson, Devin Moore coming in with that transition class that Napier brought in, they have emphasized, it's funny, the linebackers are this year, but other than that, it's been defensive line and defensive back has been where they've really seen the most success in recruiting overall. I mean, even when you just talk about, offense, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, things like that, there have been times and places where Florida struggled, but defensive line and DB has been a place where Florida's been really solid for the last couple of years.
Yeah, we see the staff doing really good work in both, really where a territory they're quite familiar. A lot of guys out of Texas, see a little bit of Mississippi, Louisiana. This is not we'll pull the numbers when it's all said and done. I imagine we're going to see some more Florida guys pop up at some point, but they've really extended the reach nationally here. I know we're talking more southeast toward maybe a little bit west with Texas. We're getting a little bit west there, but the staff certainly has no problem going anywhere to recruit this cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we always sit there, and I mean, I know I say it over and over and over again that you got to put a circle around Gainesville and bring guys in from there. And they just said to hell with that. They were going to go out and get people from all over the place, and certainly are hitting fertile ground where Napier's got relationships and Napier's been successful before. Look, Florida's got 22 commits this year, but they only had, I think, 20 last year and 19 the year before. So they've got a lot of spots. And this is a class where you could imagine them having 28, 29, 30 signees. And then they can't go into the transfer portal as hard, but I don't think that's necessarily what you want to do at this point. I think the transfer portal up until this point has been Billy Napier's way of sort of putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, and they're finally going to go to the doctor and start putting some sutures in. And that's going to be, I think, how you grade this class. 91.87, a very good overall recruiting ranking or overall player average. It's not the best. You got Georgia at 93.5, Ohio State at 93.6, Alabama at 93.1. So it's not up with those three, but it's sort of in that next tier down in terms of where these guys are. 22 commits compared to Georgia's 26, but third overall in the point ranking. And I think where they end up in the point ranking is actually going to be more dependent on how many guys they sign versus the quality of the guys that they sign. So they're going to be in that 3 to 6 range overall, which, look, Florida hasn't been the third ranked class in years. So, we'll take the improvement. I think there's still another step to take. We'll see if they can do that next year. But, after just years of mediocrity on the recruiting trail, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. This is a very, very good, if not elite recruiting class. And, it's certainly something to grow with.
We got Optimistic Will making another appearance on the show.
I show up every once in a while. Yeah. Look, if Billy Napier was recruiting like crap, Optimistic Will would not be making an appearance. But I'm looking and I'm going, a bunch of 5 stars like on the roster, 92 average player rating. Like, those are the types of metrics that you start talking about that you need in order to be successful. And we know what it takes on the recruiting trail to be successful. And they're getting there. They're not there yet, but they're getting there. And I think, all the people who got mad at me a couple years ago or last year and are like, it's a slow build. Look, I mean, yes, they have been. This is a non-traditional way of building a roster. They are being successful at it. We will see whether they can continue that as things move on, because 1 year does not make a program, good or bad. And so they're going to have to start stringing them together.
So this will actually be a nice transition question, but before I get into it, I do want to throw out there, I've been throwing out the term Optimistic Will in hopes of you using it in the third person at some point. We got that done today. Very excited about that. Very excited about it. So hashtag Optimistic Will, everybody. He's just in time for this season. I like it. But hey, one of those differences, Will, and I know you've run the numbers, you go back. If anyone doubts the level of research Will does on this stuff, I've seen some of the spreadsheets. You go way deep on this stuff with recruiting. And the one thing, though, that I've brought up in the last year that I do believe, and you can even see the difference with just hold up the Rashada situation, right? Hopefully that's the last time I ever have to say that phrase. But the Rashada situation definitely marks the turning point in what seems to be a huge difference with this Florida Victorious group. And again, I'm not knocking the Gator Collective and those guys, because I know a lot of those guys are doing the best they could with that situation. That was a tough situation, but man, whatever they're doing with Florida Victorious, it's just there seems to be a different level of organization and approach here, and that definitely seems to have impacted year 3 of recruiting under Billy Napier.
I mean, it turns out that having an organization that all moves in the same direction is important. And, if there was one thing we learned about the Rashada situation, it's that the right hand didn't necessarily know, and in many cases couldn't know what the left hand was doing because of some of the laws that existed in the state of Florida and those sorts of things. And I think a couple things happened.
Allegedly.
One is, I think a couple of things. One is that when you're embarrassed nationally, you decide to hell with following the rules, and if we have to,
Florida did update their law.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Is the second thing. The second thing is that Florida changed the law to give their team, or to put their teams to make sure that their teams weren't at a giant disadvantage. Now, The good news for Florida is that Florida State's still in the ACC, so they're in a huge disadvantage from a money perspective, apparently, to hear them complain about it. But look, there's no reason why Florida should not be playing with the big boys when it comes to all of the different things that are associated with college football, whether it's facilities, whether it's staff, whether it's personnel, whether it's how they deal with their alumni and their boosters, whether it's seat licenses and suites and all that stuff, or whether it's NIL. Like, all that stuff should be on par with every organization that's out there. Now, just because you have the resources doesn't mean you win all the time. And anybody who's a Cowboys fan and has seen Jerry Jones spend money after money after money and not accomplish winning the Super Bowl understands that just because you have resources doesn't mean you necessarily always win. And so you still need organizations, you need people leading those organizations, and you need everybody moving in the same direction. And that seems to be what's happened, right? I mean, you've got the Florida Victorious organization seems to be putting this stuff together. We'll see, though, right? I mean, again, I am excited about where the recruiting class is going, but none of that matters if there's a drop like there was at Texas A&M after they had their big time recruiting class. Because this isn't an A&M recruiting class from a couple of years ago. This is a recruiting class that's getting you on that next tier so that you can take another jump. And if this is a slow build where in 2025 the recruiting class is slightly better than 2024, and then in 2026 it's better than 2025, well, then this was a huge stepping stone to get to where Florida needed to be. If they sort of peter out at this level or even take a step back, well, it's still going to be tough to beat the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Ohio States of the world. So a lot of what like the narratives almost always end up following the result that you see. And, so if we see a result that's positive, it'll be like, oh, Florida victorious, solved all the problems. Maybe it's just that Billy Napier and his staff are doing a better job in terms of how they're allocating resources for these guys,
that could
right?
Be it too. That could be
and,
it too.
And so, I think it's probably a lot of different things, but NIL is a big part of it. And there's no doubt that having the NIL as a part of the organization and being able to communicate with them makes a huge difference, especially when other schools could do that because they weren't in the state.
You just look at the situation from today versus a year ago when you had the superstars at NIL early on were Texas A&M, Miami. How's it going at both those places right now with those two organizations? A&M, I know they're kind of doing it's not quite the same deal as Miami there, but the organization, that 12-man group there that they had, that's how, check in on the status of that, see how that's going. So it is interesting to see what a year can bring. And we were in a very fluid market. And that, I feel like that is definitely going to be, we might not fully understand the impact of it yet, even still, but just seeing the early signs, it definitely feels like that was a significant impact in Billy Napier's second cycle there. So good to see things turn around. Another big win on the trail for the Gators. Kudos to Napier, Corey Raymond, and the entire staff going into Louisiana, taking out a big time recruit under the nose of LSU. Let's move on here to the final topic of the show here. Shannon Terry of On3 tweeted the following. Tweeted X. What are we doing, Will? What are we calling it?
Tweeted, and I can't.
I'm sticking with tweeted for a while until we get the lingo down. I'm not correct. I'm not doing this every time. All right. So he tweeted the following after Missouri landed 5-star defensive lineman Williams Winari out of he's outside of Kansas City. I believe it was like Lee Summit, Missouri. So in-state kid, Missouri keeps him home. Part of the reason why Missouri kept him home is that I got this here from a tweet from Pete Nakos of On3. He said, once he signs a financial aid agreement as early as September 1st, he can begin earning NIL dollars as a high school senior, Will. That's a part of a new Missouri law that allows high schoolers to actually earn NIL too. So they can enter these NIL deals as high schoolers. Big reason to stay home in Missouri. Missouri giving the state of Missouri giving a little advantage to the in-state Tigers with the recruiting. So I want to talk about Shannon Terry's tweet though in this situation. He said, NIL is bringing parity to college sports. The years where a team could sign 7+ 5-stars out of 32 are ending. NIL will expand the number of teams that could win the title from historically 3 to 4 a year to 2 times or 3 times that number. I would argue the following with Shannon Terry here. I understand what he's saying. I understand the theory as well. You would think that teams could go all in on their highest guy on the board with the NIL. They could figure ways out to get extra players in the door. And quite frankly, outside of Florida, I'd love to see Florida continue to rack in top-rated classes here. But, the days of watching Alabama get 7 or 8 5-star players, I think they got 9 last year. I'm pretty sure they got 9. I think Texas A&M got 8 the year before. Terry, I do believe he was referring to the future, though. So, Will, overall, he's saying that the more competitive field, you're going to get two to three times more teams a year are going to win the national, are going to seriously compete for the national title. I would also argue that the playoff field expanding to 12 teams will help that as well. So I'm not sure if this is as big of a statement as it seems here, in the sense that I think college football is trending this way anyway. But I do still think that the Georgias of the world, and when Georgia comes down a notch, the Alabamas, and when Bama comes down a notch, the Texas, or whoever picks up where they left out, hopefully Florida again at some point. College football has always been filled with certain teams dominating at certain stretches, and it kind of goes on for about a 5 to 10 year stretch. Will, are we going to really see the sport change that much where you're going to see Missouri jump up and capture a national title anytime soon?
Not as long as Drinkwitz is the coach there, but
he did have a nice celebration jumping into the arms of another coach.
He's an interesting cat. Look, I think if you look at 2022, you had A&M with 8 5-stars. The next lowest was Georgia at 5, and then Alabama at 3. If you look at 2023, you had Alabama with 9, Georgia with 5, Texas with 4, Oklahoma with 3, and then 3 or 4 teams with like 2. So basically you end up with like 8 teams that distribute the 5-stars pretty evenly. And then you have a few teams that pick up a stray. Right. And so come back to me when Missouri has 3 5-stars. And part of the problem is that law for Missouri only helps when you happen to have the number 1 player overall in the state of Missouri. And most of the time, 8 of the 32 5-stars are in the state of Florida or the state of Alabama or the state of Georgia, right? And so the advantage that Missouri got there is not necessarily an advantage you're going to have all the time. What I will say is, and I think this is where Terry's getting it right a little bit, though maybe for different reasons, is what I think is happening is that all the players who committed a few years ago did not get an NIL deal. And so a lot of the NIL money has been used to keep players where they are, or to get them through the portal. And so the total available dollars have been less that have been available out in the marketplace, right? If you're Missouri and you're just trying to keep your star from transferring, then you got to pay that guy, as opposed to now he already got paid, right? He's already got all his NIL stuff already set up. He's not necessarily looking for somebody else to come in and snipe him. You're not worried about just retaining your roster with the funds that you have, which means you have more funds to put into the high school market. And so I think what you'll see is that you'll see a driving up of the price for those truly elite guys. And yeah, that will start to narrow the idea that A&M can get 8 of them, right? I think A&M was really early to the party, probably overpaid a little bit early for some of those guys, but wound up getting a ton of them because they were willing to do that. I think last year Alabama said, to hell with this, we're putting our foot down, and probably did the same thing. Can you do that every year? We'll see, right? And this year we are seeing things level out. This is a weird year for recruiting where you've got sort of that first tier with Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, and then you got a lot of guys or a lot of programs in the 90 to 92 range for the average player rating. There's going to be some movement that we haven't seen very much. Usually by the time you get to September, nobody moves, right? It's like guys will move in the point totals because one team has 13 recruits and one team has 22. And so the team with 13 rises up the board as they just sign more players. But from an average player rating, they don't really move very much. I think there's actually an opportunity for some teams to move a little bit this year, but that's what I would say. I would say that the transfer portal movement is starting to slow down, which is going to put more funds into the high school recruiting market, which is going to make the allocation of resources more critical for some of these programs that have just gone out and said, I don't care what it costs, go get those guys. And they'll have to be a little bit more judicious. And so maybe that means you get a 5-star redistributed someplace else. But the reality is that if you're an elite prospect in the Southeast and you have the option of Alabama or Missouri, like the earnings on the back end of what you would get from going to Alabama and becoming a star and going to the NFL and having the Saban experience and the Saban stamp of approval is probably more than what you get from having the Drinkwitz stamp of approval when you decide to go to the league. So if you go to Missouri, you got to be a star and you got to have people around you who enable you to do that. So, look, Jay Cutler went to Vanderbilt. He became an NFL quality quarterback, right? Made a lot of money in the league. And was effective when he was at Vanderbilt. So that sort of guy who can make that sort of difference is going to get an opportunity. You're still playing in the SEC, so I think that's still valuable. But I mean, again,
who's the starting quarterback at Texas this year?
Ewers, right?
Yeah, where did he start his college career?
Ohio State.
Skipped a year, his senior year of high school, to go to Ohio State. And why did he do that, Will?
Money.
Yeah, get to start collecting that NIL deal. Start collecting a little NIL money a year ahead of time, and then as soon as he's done with that season, going back to Texas. So I do think you're going to see some of this type of thing, and maybe Winari here. Maybe he collects the money as a senior at Missouri, plays down the road. He did talk about. I saw an interview with him. He did talk about how it's important to him. He's from outside Kansas City. I believe that's about a 2-hour, hour and a half, 2-hour drive to Columbia, in that range. So he's talked about his family being in the stands, and maybe it's a sincere decision. That's what he wants to do, but he could also make the money this year, make the money at Mizzou another year. And then if he doesn't like it, the Alabama spot's still going to be there for him a couple of years from now.
The other thing I think that is important to note is look where Missouri is in the recruiting rankings. They're 55th overall. They have an average player rating of 88.3, even with the number one player overall.
Not many players, right?
They have 12 commits, 3 blue chips, right? Mm-hmm. So, and this is the thing that, so when I harp on elite prospects, the reason I harp on that is because the assumption is that you've already filled up your roster with the depth players, right? So when you look at the teams in the SEC, for the most part, they tend to range somewhere between 1 and 20 in the overall rankings. So right now, Georgia's 1, Florida's 3, Alabama's 4, LSU's 7, A&M's 10, Tennessee's 11, Auburn's 14, Oklahoma, who will be there next year, is 16, Texas is 18. South Carolina is 19, Arkansas is 21, right? So you start talking about how do you differentiate yourself when you're up in that upper tier of the SEC? Well, the way you differentiate yourself is by bringing in 5-star guys who are can't miss prospects along with all the depth. Mm-hmm. The issue that I have with saying that Missouri is breaking the mold and is gonna be able to play with the big boys is that Missouri doesn't have any of that depth in this recruiting class at all so far. And so Drinkwitz is going to have to build that up. Now, he did have one good recruiting class a couple of years ago. Last year was a little bit of a disappointment. This year so far, a little bit of a disappointment in terms of where they're going to end up, which means, look, I mean, Missouri is going to be a team that with high-level play from the guys they bring in those elite prospects is going to be able to win a game every once in a while. They'll be able to go up and snipe somebody. I mean, hell, they almost got Georgia last year, right? But I don't think that they're a team that you look at and go, yeah, they'll be competing for the playoffs year in, year out because they brought in this one 5-star guy. Is it possible you'll have somebody run through a conference like TCU did last year, like Michigan State did or Washington did a few years ago and were able to get in the playoff? Well, 12, yeah, absolutely. There will be an opportunity to do that every once in a while. But the big problem for Missouri is that the kid they're bringing in ain't a quarterback. Right. And the big thing that you have to do is you have to be able to find a quarterback if you're going to compete at a big time level in any level of football, right? If you're a high school program and you don't have a quarterback, you're going to struggle. And so with Brady Cook as their quarterback, they're going to continue to struggle because that's just the reality of college football. I actually think Florida in a lot of different places is going to be a pretty good team this year, but we're all looking at it going, it's going to really require a step forward from Graham Mertz for this team to do anything really significant this year. And, depending on what you think about Mertz, depends on what you probably think about the season. Last year, when Anthony Richardson played well, Florida won. When Anthony Richardson played poorly, Florida lost. And when Anthony Richardson was Jekyll and Hyde in the first half and the second half, sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. It just sort of depended on whether they could hold on at the end. So, I get what Shannon Terry's saying. I understand what he's saying. I just don't know that I think good programs have already started to figure out how to allocate the resources effectively. And so you don't have an advantage that you might have had 2 or 3 years ago. So if Missouri all of a sudden had 3 or 4 5-star guys 3 years ago, I'd go, oh, they just found an edge over other people. That's actually the commentary I have on A&M a couple of years ago and then they came back to earth the next year. It's like, yeah, because everybody else realized, oh crap, we have to spend with those guys in order to get these guys to come in. But they were able to find that edge. So that's going to be the question. And that Missouri law is an edge when it comes to recruiting this particular player. If they have 5 or 6 5-star guys in the state of Missouri coming up in the next 3 years, they'll have a real opportunity to get those guys. But are they going to go into the state of Florida and pull those guys in? Nah.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, they have to be in Missouri, and you're assuming that you're not just ahead of the curve on the law right now, and that the other laws aren't going to update as well. Because there seems to be a willingness from different states to update the laws to keep keep pace with some of these advancements. And I don't think we're seeing Tommy Tuberville is leading a bill out of Congress. I don't think we've heard the end of this. It's still going to be rapidly developing.
Well, so this is actually I will say that for a nerd like me, this is actually kind of fun because the rules change every year, and so you can constantly be looking for what is that edge, what is that thing that I can do or that my program can do to exploit things. So I wrote an article. I think it was in the magazine. Yeah, I wrote an article in the magazine about how they should just pay these guys under NIL and have them as preferred walk-ons, so you have more scholarships.
Who do we use? Was it the Santana Moss comparison?
Yeah, Santana Moss was the guy who.
For those of you who don't follow,
aren't old like us,
late '90s Miami football. Santana Moss, the wide receiver that played in the NFL for a long time, played with the Hurricanes. But that was the time when Miami was going through some of its scholarship cuts, and he was technically at the university on scholarship in track and field, I believe.
Yep.
On that. So that's you had written an article detailing how that can potentially be used in NIL.
Well, and the point wasn't that, hey, Florida should do this, though I think they should if they have an opportunity to. The point was that you've got to be looking for, how do I maximize the talent that I can get on my roster given the constraints that I have? So Florida should have less constraints than other programs, but if you find an edge and you have less constraints than other programs, then you should be tarring and feathering everybody who's beneath you in terms of resources. So if you could have it, you don't even have to do it egregiously. You could probably do it with 2 or 3 guys where you just go, look, we'd like you to be a preferred walk-on, but here's the NIL deal. And then you can bring in guys through the transfer portal you wouldn't have been able to bring in otherwise, right? Because now you have available scholarship options. Like, there are going to be ways, and not just with scholarships and not playing with scholarships, there are going to be ways to find edges in all this stuff. I think one of the things is that teams that go through transitions are going to have a real hard time holding on to their players. Like you mentioned the article I wrote about Tennessee, Josh Heupel came in, and he came in late because of the whole McNugget fiasco with Jeremy Pruitt there, but he didn't get hired till like January 27th. And that 2021 class that came in, they got 4 guys left on their roster from the 17 that they signed. So it was a low signing class anyway. Pruitt gets fired. They get Heupel in after early signing day, like a week before national signing day. They still get 17 guys to sign, but all those guys have transferred. The top 7 guys in that class are all playing someplace else. The 8th guy is projected to be a 3rd string cornerback. And you're just looking at going, they got 2 defensive players from that entire class who are going to play this year. And that's what you're going to see, right? So if you're an organization trying to raid the transfer portal, one of the things you got to be able to do is understand what's the price for those guys who are coming out from a situation, because in October which coaches are about to get fired, right? And there are ways to get contact via through back channels and players who played with that guy in high school and all that sort of stuff. And if you know you're going to have a hole coming up, and you got a hole you want to fill, you can basically figure out how you're allocating your resources before early signing day, which means you don't run out of money when it comes time to bring those guys in for early signing day or national signing day. So they're just ways that people are going to be able to find to get benefits that other entities can't. And the teams that do that the best are going to be the ones that win consistently. And look, I mean, that's one of the things that I think Nick Saban has always done really, really well, is he undoubtedly makes the most out of the resources that he has. And then he does a really good job of, and this is why it's become such an arms race in recruiting. He did a really nice job of, once he brought in one big time recruiting class by finding that edge, all of a sudden his boosters were bought in, and it was like, all right, everything just grows and grows and grows and grows because everybody sees the progress. And I think that's one of the things. Mullen was on a podcast, 2 weeks ago? And he took a couple of swipes at the Florida administration in terms of not giving him the resources that he needed. But at the same time, like, the support comes from folks seeing the progress, and we weren't seeing the progress. And so it doesn't surprise me that people weren't necessarily supporting him, when, at least in terms of monetarily, when it came to recruiting, because we weren't seeing a real huge benefit in that space. We're seeing that with Napier. And so I expect that the financial support there to really start to pick up.
It will. I will say this, Shannon Terry, I share the wish that you're making there. I hope it breeds a little more competition across the board. Unfortunately, college football has always been fairly top heavy. Will
It's interesting. As
pretty top heavy stuff.
As a Florida fan, I don't, right? Like, I just look at it and I go, college sports are top heavy. College football, especially, is top heavy. And when it's top heavy in service of the Gators, it's fun to win.
Well, let's be real. Florida's won 3 national titles in their entire history, right? In our entire history, we've won 3 national titles. In the rest of the years of college football, I'm tired of watching Alabama every single year, Will. And now Georgia's done that. I'm Clemsoned out too. Give me a mix up. A TCU fun run to watch. I'm not a big TCU guy. It didn't really do much for me either way. But give me a little new blood here and there. I could definitely use new blood when the Gators aren't in the mix.
I think that's the thing, is you're having some recency bias here, considering that Florida went on a stretch where they won 6 straight SEC championships.
I understand,
and we're constantly in the mix
in
for
the
that
national title hunt. I get it.
And look, I think it's really good for college football when you have those Florida State games at the end of the year that are barn burners, and both of those teams are in the top 5, right? Like, those are awesome things that really sort of drew us into the sport. Is a big reason why you and I are fans, and a big reason why we're doing what we're doing right now. At the same time, if you've got all kinds of parity, then that doesn't happen. But look, parity's coming. It was
the same reason why I was sick of Nebraska when I was a kid, right? And I got sick of Miami for a while, and I hated USC after a while. You get sick of seeing the same thing over and over again. So it's like, if my team's not winning, I at least want to watch something interesting. And watching Alabama win again is definitely not that. I'm just okay. They won again.
Well, you haven't seen them win in a couple of years, so I'll take an Alabama win if it means that Georgia doesn't.
All 2 seasons in which we've been subjected to Georgia. So do I feel like I've had any kind of a break? Not at all. Not at all. But I'll say this. I do share Shannon Terry's wish, with the exception for the Gators, of course. The Gators can dominate. I can live with that. All right, Will. Well, one more time for everybody out there, a reminder on when people can expect to receive the updated, the additional content to the magazine.
Yep. So assuming you get all the writing done you need to do, it'll be the 18th on Friday. You should see that in your email box. We'll get that done. And again, if you want to go order it, you can get it at readandreaction.com/MAG. Buy the digital copy, because we are sold out of the hard copy. And thank you to everybody who's helped us out this spring, this summer. It's been awesome. I mean, I've sent a lot of them out, and I've stuffed a lot of envelopes, and my kids were not as helpful as I thought they would be, but it's a labor of love, man. And we're really proud of it. We think it's a pretty cool product. We think you'll enjoy it. And so we appreciate you helping it out. And if you haven't bought it yet, check it out. It's not that expensive, and give you something to read while you're at the beach.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start the writing after I finish uploading and editing everything. Well, thanks, bro. All right, everybody. 1 week. We're getting just, the season's around the corner, man. We're starting to get a little. We're starting to
get a little chippy over here.
Let's start talking about football, man. We're ready to start talking about football. I hope we don't. There's three letters I hope to avoid the entire season. Between, really, I want to take a break. Let's take a vacation from September through December on the 3 letters. NIL. Will. Let's take a vacation on talking about NIL topics. I would love that. And just talk about football.
Yeah, so can we take a vacation and not talk about UGA? That'd be good with me.
Those are 3 letters I'd also like to stop talking about too. So we'll do that too. All right, everybody, have a great week. 1 week closer to football. We're getting there, everybody. Hang in there. Almost there, a couple weeks away. Look out for the magazine on Friday from us. Check your email from Will. He'll keep you posted. For Will Miles, I'm Nick Knudsen. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Gators.
Go Gators. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Holler. If you're interested in more information from me and Nick, you can go over to readandreaction.com. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel here at Read and Reaction, or you can go to patreon.com/readandreaction to support us, get extra information, and we do Ask Anythings over there every once in a while as well. So check us out. Thanks for listening.